June 5th, 2016, 10th Sunday in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the first book of Kings. Elijah went to Zarephath of Sidon, to the house of a widow. The son of the mistress of the house fell sick, and his sickness grew more severe until he stopped breathing. So she said to Elijah, "Why have you done this to me, O man of God? Have you come to me to call attention to my guilt and to kill my son?" Elijah said to her, "Give me your son." Taking him from her lap, he carried the son to the upper room where he was staying and put him on his bed. Elijah called out to the Lord, "O Lord, my God, will you afflict even the widow with whom I am staying by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself out upon the child 3 times and called out to the Lord, "O Lord, my God, let the life breath return to the body of this child." The Lord heard the prayer of Elijah. The life breath returned to the child's body, and he revived. Taking the child, Elijah brought him down into the house from the upper room and gave him to his mother. Elijah said to her, "See, your son is alive." The woman replied to Elijah, "Now indeed I know that you are a man of God. The word of the Lord comes truly from your mouth." The word of the Lord.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Galatians. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel preached by me is not of human origin, for I did not receive it from a human being, nor was I taught it, but it came through a revelation of Jesus Christ. For you heard of my former way of life in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God beyond measure and tried to destroy it, and progressed in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries among my race. since I was even more a zealot for my ancestral traditions. But when God, who from my mother's womb had set me apart and called me through His grace, was pleased to reveal His Son to me, so that I might proclaim Him to the Gentiles, I did not immediately consult flesh and blood, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me. Rather, I went into Arabia and then returned to Damascus. Then, after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to confer with Cephas and remained with him for 15 days. But I did not see any other of the apostles, only James, the brother of the Lord. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus journeyed to a city called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd accompanied him. As he drew near to the gate of the city, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, He was moved with pity for her and said to her, "Do not weep." He stepped forward and touched the coffin. At this the bearers halted, and he said, "Young man, I tell you, arise." The dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, exclaiming, "A great prophet has arisen in our midst, and God has visited His people." This report about him spread through the whole of Judea and in all the surrounding region. The Gospel of the Lord.
June 5th, the 10th Sunday in Ordinary Time. The first reading comes from 1 Kings 17 to 24. This being Ordinary Time, the first reading is a common theme with the Gospel. The first reading speaks about how Elijah raises the son of the widow of Zarephath from the dead. This was her only son. He had died, and this woman had taken care of Elijah during the drought. He stretches himself out upon the child and returns the life breath to that child. We have to remember this because we'll hear Jesus do a similar thing when He raises the son of the widow of Nain. The second reading is from Galatians 1, 11 to 14a, 15a and c, 16a, 17, and 19. Paul insists that he's preaching a gospel, the good news, which isn't from human origin. Paul had preached in the area of Galatia, which wasn't a city, it was a region. And after he had finished preaching, some Jewish Christian missionaries came from Jerusalem and said that Paul had sold them a bill of goods, that he had told them that they didn't have to follow Jewish laws when in fact they do have to. Remember, this was a great debate in the early history of the church. Jesus was the Messiah whom Yahweh had sent to Israel. If Gentiles converted, then they were believing in that Messiah. Therefore, when they were baptized, they were in a sense becoming Jews. They would have considered that their religion. Paul preached to the Gentiles and said, you don't have to follow the Jewish pattern. Now, the Jewish Christian missionaries from Jerusalem accused Paul of being anti-Jewish, and he said, I was a better Jew than anyone. I was far progressed in Judaism. In fact, from other writings, we know that he studied under Gamaliel. He was a Pharisee. And Paul continues, but God, who set me apart from my mother's womb, sent me to preach to the Gentiles. Now, interestingly enough, Jeremiah the prophet uses that same line, and Jeremiah was called the prophet to the nations. We don't know why Jeremiah obtained that title, because he never preached to the pagan peoples. Paul considers himself the fulfillment of that promise. He was called from his mother's womb to preach to the Gentiles, and he did that. And in fact, he didn't draw this mission from the apostles. They didn't send him out. He only met the apostles 3 years after he converted. He went up to Jerusalem and met Cephas and James. Why did he go up to meet them? Possibly to learn more about the earthly life of Jesus, because remember, Paul knew the risen Jesus. He had never followed him during his life. The Gospel is from Luke 7:11 to 17. This is the story of Jesus' reanimation of the son of the widow of Nain. Notice I said reanimation. It's not a resurrection, because resurrection means you have a glorified body. You'll never die again. The only person in the Gospels to have a resurrection was Jesus himself. Everybody else, the daughter of Jairus, the son of the widow of Nain, Lazarus, were reanimated. Why does Jesus reanimate this son? Because this is a widow, and in Israel there were no social benefits. She would have had to glean in the fields, barely survive. And so Jesus raises the son so that she will not be abandoned. She will have someone to take care of her. Fear seizes the people because they recognize that this is something very holy happening in their midst. And what is their response? A great prophet has arisen. And the report spread all throughout Judea. Jesus gives us life. A life that is so powerful that even when we die, we'll still be alive in him. Jesus also fills our life with compassion. Many of the miracles that he performs in the Gospel of Luke are done out of compassion, as they are in this occasion in compassion for the widow of Nain. And may God bless us.